Well, welcome to the journey. Lori Rubio is with us today, and so let me just, besides welcoming you to the journey, I just let me just briefly just share a little bit about what the journey is about. Um, the journey is a podcast that I started a couple years ago, and we just recently did our 100th episode. And over that time period, it has been just stories of individuals that may have had something that they struggled with, something that maybe it was they changed something in their life, maybe it was something that they overcame. And so it was just really about how to spread and send messages through our own stories of our life, and how did those stories may be able to plant some seeds of hope or encouragement for someone who may be listening. And Laura, welcome, and
Thank you.
I'm glad that you were able to join us today. So Laura, maybe you could just start off with maybe first as we begin to get into your story. Um, what does Laura do for fun when you have an opportunity to have fun? What do you do?
So I like to do bracelets and beads and crochet. So I usually do that for fun. I like all types of music and singing and dancing. So I've done choreographies for quinceañeras. I don't know if you're familiar where they're going to be 15th,
Yep.
on their 15th birthday.
Yep.
So I did about 2 years ago. I did three or four of them. Like every 6 months, I will do that because I just needed that dance in me. I used to dance when I was younger, so I really like that. So choreography gives me that life. But then, it's just a lot when you have to go to work or you have to go to school. Then, it was just a lot for me at that time. So then I just do beads and crocheting, and that's what I do for fun.
Okay. And maybe for some of the ones in the audience that may not really be as familiar, you choreographing a portion of the quinceañera. So maybe tell us a little bit about like why do we need to do that? Why is that important? And maybe also talk a little bit about what is the significance about quinceañera and that rites of passage.
Sure. Usually for the Hispanic, or I should say Mexican, I'm not sure if all the in every I don't know if South America will do that. I just know that for Mexico because I was born in Mexico City, and the they usually celebrate the 15 years for a girl to present her to the community, saying like now you're becoming a lady versus a girl. So now that's what it started. You present your daughter to the community, and so they do a celebration. And so they do. I shouldn't say as a ritual, but it's more like the presentation, and they share the values. They go to church, they do a dance. You're supposed to go to church first, and then have a party. And so during that party, that's when they decide that they want to do different dances. So one of the dances is you dance with your doll. So you're giving away your doll to your parents. So it's like that they present you with high heels and a crown. And so then you move from being a little girl to a lady. And so it's just a dance that gives the representation of like my parents are not just letting me be, like now I'm a lady and I can, well, now society knows that. So it's a presentation to society. And
Sure.
then sometimes they decide to do different dances. They dance with the dead, and then there's another dance with a group of kids. So it could be the quinceañera and four boys, or it could be her and equals to 15 people in the dance. So just depending on what the parents wants to do, I've had both. I had just four, and then I've had 15 that will have to do choreography for them. Yeah.
So so it's a rites of passage, right? And
Mhm.
it's in this going from girlhood to adulthood to womanhood
Correct.
and being
Correct.
a lady.
Yes.
And so then it's a ceremony that represents, and then similar to like a wedding or similar to other ceremonies where there are certain now uh, values that are stated of now you're going from little girl ways
Mhm.
into now to being a woman, to being a lady. These are some expectations, these are some values to follow,
Correct.
that
Yes.
that aspect. And
Yes.
and and then the parents are, it's like an announcement of my daughter is no longer a little girl, but now a woman, now a lady.
Correct. Hmm.
Wow. Okay. Very, very cool. I can see, having studied, specifically men's psychology and in other, not necessarily in our society in America, but in other traditions, there would be rituals and ceremonies for men that they would, like in Native American traditions, men would go and um, they would fast and be prepared to go out into the wilderness to cry for a vision. And then that would be a spiritual experience where they would be asking God for what is their life purpose and what was, and then when they came back from that time period, typically it'd be up to 4 days. They would then share with the elder what dream or vision that may have been given to them. And that would kind of, direct, like, what were they supposed to, what was their place in the village, what was their, and that was for males, and so, so I'm familiar with some of those, initiation rituals or ceremonies.
Right.
So
That's
and
pretty
then
cool.
and
Yeah.
so now did you, and I'm assuming you went through that process, did you have a quinceañera?
I did not. I had my mom had, I had a birthday party, but
Okay.
it wasn't the same. So um, a lot of people. So when you do quinceañeras, it just there is a lot of financially you have to be prepared to do those. And at that time, when I turned 15, my parents were not in a position to have a
Mm,
quinceañera for me. So it was a little sad. I was very sad because I had already designed my dress. So, since I was 10, I decided, okay, this is how I want my dress for my quinceañera, and we're going to do this. But at that time, my parents couldn't afford one. And so my mom decided that if we wouldn't have money, then I wasn't going to have one. So I just had a very small, I invited friends, but it was a small birthday party that I had. And then they also celebrated here a sweet 16 because I was in Mexico when I was 15. So at that point, we were going back and forth. My parents didn't know yet where we were going to stay. And so I had my quinceañera in Mexico. It was just, I had a birthday party and I didn't go to church. I didn't do all the things that you normally do on a quinceañera. But then when I had my sweet 16, um, my mom actually, I went to mass and the priest gave me blessings, and then we went and we had a party. But of course, it wasn't like it was just a party.
sure, sure, sure,
so
gotcha.
so
Okay.
I think that I really missed that part because I was hoping, it's like I'm from 1975, and at that time, I think that you dream with princes and and the dresses, and the prince is gonna come, and we're gonna have all this. That's how my mentality was when I was little. So I think it was something that I had dreamed, with that, and then eventually you dream with the wedding, and so you think, okay, this is how it's gonna happen, but unfortunately, it wasn't. It wasn't that way. So
Sure,
I
sure.
didn't get to have that.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that aspect, and thank you for sharing that because I think it sounds like for you, especially when you were able to help with the choreographing of the quinceañeras that you were asked to do that, you embraced the ceremony, you embraced what the value of it was, because you had longed for it when you were little. And
Right,
so
right.
by no stretch of the imagination, I imagine it was just a job for you. It was pretty important to you,
It was. It
for you
was.
to
Yes.
make sure that for those girls and for those parents, that it was something that was special, that were
Yes.
it's a special, uh, it's a special ceremony.
Right. And it's going to be a special moment that the girl, will always remember.
Sure.
It's something that you have to appreciate because parents that usually pay for these birthdays, it's a lot of money. There's a lot of things involved, and it's a lot of respect just for the kids that are participating because you have to understand that you're here not just because you're going to dance in a quinceañera, but because you're gonna be, with this girl representing, like not representing, but you represent your community, who you are, and also the values that we grew up with. So
Mhm.
it's there should be a lot of respect too with that.
Sure, sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Well, thank you for sharing
Sure.
that aspect. So yeah, so maybe we go there. So tell us a little bit about so you were born in Mexico, but where in Mexico were you born?
I was born in Mexico City.
Mexico
So
City. Okay.
yes, we moved. The situation in Mexico City was hard for my parents. So I want to say 1989 or maybe a year before that, my mom, she had sisters and brothers here. And so she started looking at the possibility that maybe we should, move in and to see if we could stay. The first time we came is she was really ill and she had surgery. So we stayed because of her surgery. And after that, we went back to Mexico. But then I was in the process of, well, I started fifth grade. So I had fifth grade here in Arizona. And then we moved back to Mexico City. And then she decided that we were going to come back. So we came back, and things with the family there didn't work out very well because of transportation and the jobs and all that stuff. So I was there for about a year. And then we moved to Chicago with my aunts. And that was in 1989. And so then that was eighth grade. Then we went back to Mexico, and I started doing like middle school, high school kind of thing. And so in order for someone to be able to go into higher education, you need to have a certificate from like high school, middle school, high school. The years are different from here. So you have to have that in order to go into higher education. And so I knew that going back and forth, my parents needed to make a decision of where is it that we're going to stay. Because if I lose that opportunity of getting the certificate, then I wouldn't be able to go into a school for higher education. So we ended up going back on my third year for, it's called, it's like the high school. And so actually it was eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade. We came back when I was in ninth grade here, but I had the certificate from eighth grade in Mexico. So the years are different.
Sure.
So because of that, with that certificate, as long as I had that, I could go back and start, for the higher education. But then it was difficult because it's like a lottery when you apply to go to higher education after high school. You have to, and it will be like they start college sooner, so you will have to be able to prove them that you completed a certificate. And for good colleges, then it's just hard to get into a place if you have not been living there for a long time. So it's like a lottery. So you're either going to late night or mornings, but because usually the people that are there and study there all the time, they will get the morning shifts. Otherwise, you get the night shifts. And so it was just difficult. And so I know that I needed the certificate. I got my certificate. Then my mom decided to come back. And then I started here ninth grade in high school. And so we were back and forth. And I think that was the difficult part.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we ended up staying in Cicero. That's where I lived for years.
Okay. And so so in the United States, U.S. High school, then you graduated, finished high school here in the States, here in Illinois?
Yes.
Okay.
I finished my high school here, and then I started a little bit of college. But then again, due to financial, I couldn't. At that time, my parents were in the process of getting our documents settled, for residency, and I couldn't go to college because I couldn't apply for a grant. I didn't have enough opportunities for scholarship. I didn't know much how the system worked for college. So back then, teachers will help you and say, okay, you're going to go to college, but I don't think my English was that good either to understand what they were telling me. And so the help wasn't the best. My mom worked all the time. She didn't speak English. My dad was working also in a different state. So I didn't have the help or the guidance, I should say. I didn't have the guidance to follow up, with my school.
and I can't, even though you obviously your parents had been at different times here in the United States, not speaking English, and then obviously not being involved personally with the education, American education,
Right.
then they're not going to know what they don't know, and
Correct.
so it's
Yes.
going to be really hard to guide you. Now, did you have siblings, older,
I
younger
do. I
siblings?
have two sisters. Yes, they're younger. I'm the oldest.
So you were the
So,
oldest. So they
mhm.
were experimenting on you anyways, as far as
Right. Yes.
so and I know having and I know that in my case, I have two young adult children, and my wife and I, having been through college, we were able to guide more so than my parents being able to guide me. My dad was fortunate enough that he got a scholarship to play football when he was considered in the late 50s, early 60s, not college material, but because he was a very successful athlete, he ended up getting these scholarships in spite of what the school guidance counselor thought. But he didn't know. I mean, he literally was one of the top recruited uh, football players for his
Mm.
position in the United
Wow. Yeah.
States,
Yeah.
and he happened to pick the wrong school.
Oh.
In The story of it was that he had some what they referred to back then as unconditional scholarships, meaning if you sign, no matter what, if you play or don't play, or if you sign it, regardless if you are able to play or not, you keep the scholarship. Well, he signed a conditional scholarship, got hurt after a second year, and wasn't
Oh.
wasn't able to return to the team,
Mm.
and his so he had to essentially go back to the farm in southern Wisconsin. And so, but he had, like, you, similar to yourself, he had no guidance.
Right. Right.
My grandfather was military and had retired in the military, and really didn't have any didn't know what he didn't know, and
Right.
so that really played a part in dictating. Uh, Instead of my dad becoming an engineer, which is what he wanted to do, he ended up
Mhm.
working as a maintenance electrician in a factory, which wasn't a bad job, but it wasn't the same. It was a physical
Right. Right.
job versus um, you know possibly a white collar job.
Yes,
So
I understand. Yeah. It is.
so
It is difficult.
Yeah. And so, thinking back on that time, and then again being the oldest and a lot of back and forth, right? What was probably, if you can think back to that time period, what were some of the things that was difficult about that? And then what were some of the things that you learned about yourself because you experienced that?
Some more the difficult parts of that was more the English barrier because every time you move, I mean, I've worked with with students, or actually with, I work for a district, school district, and usually they tell you that students that move, more than, if you move the student from a school to another one, they lose almost 3 to 8 months of learning,
Mhm.
because it's so many that there's just many changes. And when I heard that for the first time, I didn't understand how I made it this far,
Mhm.
because for my parents to move me back and forth and to move me to different schools and then to have a different language, it was a lot. And as a kid, I don't remember being upset. I don't remember, it just felt like it was more like an adventure, and so we're gonna go here and it's an adventure. And I was a happy child. I just knew that there were issues financially, but I just know that, it was for the best, for our family and for my sisters and for me. So we always try to do, to behave the best way we could for my mom, and try to make sure that every time, we were somewhere, because of course we didn't have a house. We were living with aunts or uncles, that we were in our best behavior. So it was hard because of the language. I think that every time I was in the school, um, I was very frustrated because they will either give me coloring sheets, or they could give me puzzles, or they could give me I was really good at math because that's the only thing I understood. But then, when there was science or English or any other, I couldn't participate because there was nobody that spoke the language. And so um, I guess that was my frustration because I felt as a child, I felt like, well, I can be part of this group because I don't know how to do that. So, gym, of course, I could run, I could play, I could do whatever I could during that time. I would just see, and because you see what they're doing, then you do it and you follow the directions as good as you can. But unfortunately, with the rest, it was just hard because I didn't want to feel like I was dumb or stupid. And a lot of times that's how I felt
Mhm.
because they teachers didn't know how to treat me. How do you treat someone that you're not used to having your buildings or in your classroom? And so you feel like you're dumb because you don't know, they just give you something to do just so that you're doing something. but it was not fun.
Sure.
That's the hard part.
And so in that case, if you stayed, if you and your mom and sister stayed with an aunt or someone like that, they it sounds like that they were probably busy working too. So
Right.
there wasn't necessarily a whole lot of guidance there.
No.
And
Right.
and again, um, so and again, it sounds like you're now looking back and there's a lot of stuff that you now realize that didn't happen, but at the time you didn't know because you didn't we don't know what we don't know, right?
Right, right. And during the elementary time wasn't too hard. During my high school years, I had asked because there were in Cicero there were two schools and it was either west or east. And so in the area that we lived, that was the west for the west side. Um, it looked like it was more there was no kids like me. So when my mom wanted to register me, they said, "Well, just have to know that there is no bilingual program here, and that if she fails, she fails. We're not gonna be making any. Um, there is no help for the students here, so you're gonna have to either stay here on your at your own risk, or just take her to the east side of the school." And so I was scared and I told my mom, I said, no, I don't want to fail every class. Just take me to the other side, which was, farther for me to walk because I had to walk at that time. I don't know why I don't know if the bus wasn't offered or maybe I just made it. I don't remember. But I remember walking to high school all the time. And it was hard. There were more kids like me, which was great. And I had bilingual classes. The problem is that I didn't want to listen to every single class that I had, the window, the door, the floor, because that was something that I had already learned when I was in, elementary. And so every time there was a new kid coming in, they will go and start all over with things that were not helpful for me.
Mm.
So I told my mom, I said, please wake me out of the bilingual program and put me in regular classes. I will try to make sure that I can, do my best because I can handle those classes anymore. I need to learn something. And so I'm not sure how much I learned because my English wasn't perfect, but I know I graduated from high school with a C, C average. And I just think that for at that time for myself, I think I tried my best. I did what I could with the English that I that I
Sure, sure. Okay. So, and so the question, a couple different questions, and if you don't know the answer or not comfortable with the answer, just go pass. So,
Okay.
um, but and again, this would be more of maybe or maybe it's just kind of like a guessing type of thing. But it seemed like your mom uh, parents, but specifically mom, really, kept, having to go back to Mexico, but then kept wanting to come to the United States. What was, and you refer to that it wasn't good in Mexico City at that time period when you were when you were young. What were some of the challenges in Mexico slash Mexico City at that from what you remember and what you know or the stories you know of it, and then what was the hope or the belief that the United States was going to be, uh, let's say,
Better.
better? Yeah.
So the difference that in Mexico City is my mom at that time, she was around, I want to say 35, 36 years old. And so she used to work in one of in the highest tower in Mexico City. It's called Torre Latino Americana. So she used to be a supervisor for that floor. People will come from different places from, they will come visit. It was like the Sears Towers. It's a tourist
Mhm.
um, a place for tourists. So she was there, but then she had an accident and she was really, really sick and she couldn't work anymore there because of the altitude. And so they told her that, for the issues that she had and working in there, because she was on the 47, and because of the altitude in Mexico City, she needed to go to a place that was better for her and also for one of my sisters because she was having heart problems. And so when you're 35, 36, my mom only went to sixth grade. She wasn't going to be able to find another job unless you have your own business. And I know that she tried selling clothes. She tried doing a lot of other things on her own to be able to do that, but it was impossible. So I know my dad had a couple of taxis, and he will work with that, but it wasn't sufficient
Mhm.
for for the family, so and for her health. So having family here and sharing that information, they said, well, maybe you can come and then we'll work with, you can find a job, because here they hire people that are 35 or older. In Mexico, once you turn 35, 40, you can find a job. So they don't hire people at my age. And so,
Okay.
especially we don't have a degree. So it's very, very hard. So the economy, it's hard there because you can't find jobs,
Mhm.
and it's very rare when someone finds a place to, to at our age to work,
Sure.
because they don't it's very difficult. So
Okay.
that's the challenges that what my parents were facing at the time. My dad was 50, and so it was harder for him too. So
Okay.
with that said, when they come here, they both found jobs, and they were very, they could do it, because my mom then had surgery, she got healthy, and so she was a very working woman, you hardworking woman. So that's the difference.
Mm. Okay. Okay. And so, okay. Thank you for sharing that, because that is something, I'm 50 some years old, 52 years old, and I've never heard that aspect of part of the struggle, especially the mid 30, as being like a barrier, or there is, uh, for lack of better words, like ageism, right? That you're unless you have a degree there, that it's harder to be employable after a certain age. And we don't think in America, we don't think necessarily that 35 is very old. I guess you do if you're
Right.
16, but we don't think of 35 being too old to work, that aspect of it. So, um, and so I know that not just this year, but definitely in the last, you know, few years, there has been a lot of talk about immigration and legal and illegal immigration, and all those aspects. And to me, having been someone who's really enjoyed studying history, I think it's probably an aspect of why I like doing the podcast and meeting new people, and that. Um, but outside of the Native Americans that are here, and some even argue that the Native Americans were immigrants as well, but everybody in the United States is outside of the Native Americans, are all immigrants, right? At some point, they came from somewhere. However, they got to the United States, whatever the situation was, they came here not being, their family wasn't originally from here unless they were Native Americans, right? And
Mhm.
and so it's always kind of baffled me when all of a sudden, with certain different political climates, come up and go, oh no, we're gonna have closed borders versus open borders, because I'm like, how is so so with that, how what are some of your thoughts about that aspect of, that was that's one of your experiences, right? And so what,
Right.
and then maybe even some of the students that you work with also
Yeah.
face that, I'm assuming, as well.
There are, yes, there are many students, or there are many people that would come here looking for a better life. So
Mhm.
we know that there's more opportunity for work, and so that's why people come here. And the problem is that, well, not the problem, but there was a time frame where United States provided, I want to say it's amnesty, that people could just, if you had certain years living here and following, doing your taxes and all that, that you could qualify for applying for residency. So my parents fell into that category. And so unfortunately, after that, if people come there and there's no help, because obviously you have to be here for political reasons, or like refugees or people like that. Normally for Hispanics, it's very hard unless you have family. So if you have family members that are citizens here, then you can qualify to submit an application, and then your family claims you. And that's how a lot of people get their documentation, um, to become a resident or a citizen. But then for those that came here just like I did after that, and there's no other way to be legal, it's just unfortunate because the kids didn't know. They come young, they were babies maybe. If they were born here, they're not citizens. So when that happens, what do you do? All the kids know is just, where they grew up. They grew up in Rockford. That's all they know. And their parents worked very hard. But then there's just no other way that they could be legal unless they have a family member, or a law passes that says, okay, so if you arrive from this day to this day, we're going to allow you to stay in the United States. So it is sad because once students reach out a certain age, you can go to higher education. And so you see kids that can potentially be really, really good students, and maybe they want to be doctors, maybe they want to be an engineer, like an engineer or architect. They can't because they don't have the documents to be able to go. And to go to college is very expensive. So if you don't have a scholarship, if you don't have a grant, and usually, federal grants it's how students pay for college, and they can't apply for that because they are not legal students. So then you have a population with no education. I know that the DACA that came out, that students were doing it, and then that DACA came out to help students that were um, from other countries, and they allow you to study. They do not allow you to use federal grants. So the parents have to pay for that. I think scholarships, you can apply for that because scholarships, anybody can apply for scholarships, but for federal grants, they cannot. So they have to have a parent that is willing to pay their education, you know, in that case. And so it is hard. I think it's hard for a lot of us that are here. Well, in my case, when I came here, my mother had to pay $500 every quarter, and that was a monthly rent. And I couldn't, I just couldn't, I said, Mom, I'm not gonna do that to you. I was 18 years old, and I said, she can't afford $500 for tuition for college. I have two little sisters, and she has to pay rent, plus food and all other stuff. It was too much for us.
Sure, sure.
So,
And I can just as you were just talking, I'm thinking about then the ripple effect of that, and not being able to continue education, and then all the other limitations, right?
mhm,
How that can lead to, it could potentially lead to illegal activity, right? I mean, it could
right.
potentially lead to, uh, you know, maybe not necessarily violent crime, but it could easily lead to, well, how am I going to make ends meet, or
Right.
or constantly be putting yourself in a position to get underpaid, or
Mhm.
taken advantage of by people that
Right.
know that they can do that because there's not anything they really can stand on.
Right. And in most cases, that's what happens, unless someone decides to have their own company and really works really hard and saves, and they have their own, you know, business,
Mhm.
just for cutting grass or shoveling snow or whatever the case may be. But it is hard when you come from from a, from places that you don't know, well, you don't know the language. You have to be able to understand. So how are you going to be able to raise your kids in a different way? And sometimes they just come and get, people are abused just because they don't understand. They just want to have a better life, but it's just hard for them because they don't speak the language and they don't have the right documentation to do that.
Sure. And it kind of, and this is kind of where I want to kind of go in next, right? Is that they may not have someone we're talking about, if we're talking about young ones, they may not have someone at the school that can advocate for them,
Right.
or be a guide. We've
To
talked
guide it.
about that
Right.
numerous times, kind of guide them. So you work for a school district now.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I do. Yes.
And how long have you worked for the Rockford School District?
Yes.
Yep. And how long have you been with the school district?
13 years.
13 years. Okay.
Mhm.
And so with that, tell us a little bit about what you do at your job at the school, and then what's for you, what's that driving force?
So I I work for the department. It's grants. It's for the grants department, and then also I'm part of the after school program for 21st Century. It's another grant, and that's an after school program. And so um, I worked for 13 years. I was a secretary at an elementary school, and then I moved into the payroll department, and I work in payroll. And then after that, I went into the improvement and innovation department, where I am working right now. And so um, it wasn't just documents that I had to work on. It's more about after school program and extended program for students. And so what I really liked about that is that we can help students achieve that are deficient in their reading or their math. So our extended day programs are more for students that are in need for they need to be higher in their reading or their math. And so we provide those services for them at the schools that have the grant funding that we receive from the federal and state.
Okay. And so now you said you work for in the grant department, right? So
Yes. Mhm.
so do you, maybe you just said that, I got lost with it, but did you so I know that the after school program is one of the programs that's funded by the grant, but then
Correct.
during the day job, right?
Mhm.
Then now are you writing grants, or are you assisting in writing
No,
grants?
no, I don't write grants. It's if there's different documentation that we have to collect from the different schools
Hmm.
for, to be in compliance. And
Hmm.
so I usually collect that information, and then from principals and schools, and we have non-publics and private and parochial schools. So
Okay.
we have to make sure that we collect that information from
Gotcha.
them, and then make sure that all that gets filed for that compliance that we have to report.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. And so similar to when you said one of your strengths growing up and where you had early success with was math, and so
Right.
so collecting this, that makes sense to you, right? Because it
Right.
plays into your, at least it plays into your early strengths, even though
Right.
as time's gone on, you may have found strengths in other areas as well. but
Right.
but I think as I know we've shared a little bit, and is that I think of many times something that we experienced growing up, or earlier in our life, and as we've navigated through that, um, it similar to what you were saying about why it was important for you to help teach and choreograph for quinceañeras. It's equally, that how important it is for some of these grants, because then it's an opportunity, um, to help students that may fall between the cracks for a variety of different reasons,
Mhm.
may be able to get those resources. So even though during your day job may not be, you're help collecting and bringing together the data and the information so that the grant writer can write that information, um, but in some ways you kind of see the whole picture happening.
Yeah, yeah. And it is very rewarding when we prepare for any of our programs that we offer, and we know that kids are coming, and we see how excited they get. I mean, last summer it was a little challenging because we had virtual, and it was all virtual classes. But usually our summers or after school programs, kids enjoy being there, and then we are just happy that we are able to provide any help for those students. So it's rewarding when you see them writing you letters, or they're very happy and excited because an app work or something they learn new, with technology. So it is rewarding to see that happening.
And so speaking of that now, I know that just today we went back to in Rockford went back to remote learning, and
Hmm.
so that was another midstream decision that leadership had to make, and I've had to do that with my counseling agency as well. How are things regarding some of the programming? How are some of the things that you've noticed that have changed, and how are things seem to be received, and what's the risk in particular if English is a second language for those students, and as you pointed out, sometimes it's a stretch to even say it's a second language because they may not even be there yet, right? Um,
Right, right.
but how is this whole time? How do you think? How do you? And maybe you don't know, but how do you think the pandemic and COVID itself, but then also all the responses of how we've been trying to be safe. How do you think that's impacting some of those students?
I really I know some of them. I have friends that have kids, and obviously and I say friends because I've met people, in Rockford that have younger kids that are coming to the Rockford public schools, and they really don't speak English. So I think their challenge is, how are we going to be able to help them with technology? My experience during the summer, as I receive all the registrations for students that were the parents wanted them to be part of our extended day programming. It was more like, how am I going to be able to do this? And it was simply guide them, because we didn't know how it was going to be the fall. We didn't know if it was going to be online or if it was going to be in person. But I think for those that participated in our programs, it was a good opportunity to start telling them, you need to start looking at, if you have a computer, make sure that you start logging in, help the student, because this may take longer than what we think. And it's better that they're prepared now than if you wait until the last minute. So I feel really proud for what our department did during the summer, because it gave the parents an opportunity to see what it was coming, even though we didn't know yet. And the district was already doing it, because I think the last part of what was it, um, March, I think in March and April, that we sent devices home, and parents were able to log in, but it was only for third grade. I think it was third grade and up. And so we offer programs for kindergarten through seventh grade. So we gave that kindergarten through second grade an opportunity to, this is what it will be like. So let's work on it to be able that, that you're prepared. So I think that it helped them. But other parents, if they're working and they're not there, that was an experience that they share. We're working and we're not there. How am I going to have my kindergarten logging into the computer?
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I heard many different scenarios, but there's parents that said, "Well, my kindergarten knows how to do that." I'm like, okay. So yeah, it
Yeah.
just depends on how much time our parents can spend with the kids, just to teach them 1 or 2 weeks and then let them do it on their own. So
Right. Well, and I think and I think you just make a great point, Laura, is that in real time, similar to when you were talking about growing up, in real time, those are some of the real time problems that families have,
right,
because they we need to they need to make money to
right,
so that we can live, and so now the students are at home instead of school, and so who's going to be there with the students when both parents or the parent has to work. How does this all happen? And then if you have language a barrier on top of everything,
yes,
and
it's
especially,
difficult.
yeah, especially in the spring when as they would say, we were literally making it up as we were going along. I mean, I think we knew a little bit more when it came to the fall about how to prepare for it, but at least with the districts I worked with, that as much as we thought we knew, it was different when it actually came to happen
Mhm,
come
mhm.
August and September. And,
Right,
you
right.
know, but it has definitely been one of the challenging things. I think though, I guess one of the things for anybody who's listening is I think your story, Laura, is actually something that's a ray of hope in the midst of this, right? So even though you didn't have to experience, or your family didn't experience COVID at the time, right? But there
Right.
was you. If I calculate, I can't even try calculating how many, according to that formula of how many times you moved times 4 to 8 months of lost learning.
Right.
I don't even know. You lost more years learning than you actually were probably in school, right? And so, um, but at the end of it, you did pick up on, you did pick up a lot of resources. You played your strengths, and you advocated for yourself, in a lot of different areas, including asking mom not only what school to go to, but then asking her when you knew you outgrew the bilingual program,
Right.
and and especially the way that they were doing the bilingual program back then. Um,
Correct. Yeah.
and
Mhm.
and 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 hopefully that we've learned something, that we do better with that, and that we give, stronger content for students that are capable of having that. But I guess my point of saying that all that is that I know a lot of parents are concerned about, and teachers are concerned about what some students have lost during this time period. And true, the 2021 school year may not have been, from an academic standpoint, you know what we've learned, but we may have learned something also equally important, right? Resiliency, grit,
Yes.
um, and that if you continue working hard and working hard, um, that in the bigger picture, it's going to be okay.
Yes. And I think that I've seen from my experience receiving phone calls for parents and wanting to do the extended day programming, there are more parents that want their students to be successful than not. So just because we're going through this, and just because, it may be impossible sometimes for us parents to be home with our children, if they provide any type of enrichment at home, whatever it is, different than what they normally do, the student will learn something, and then will relate that into their, their life. Because a lot of our students are missing that portion. We're doing testing, or we're doing the math, or we're doing, but if they can be included in just being with the family, talk about things, read a story, tell me what you read, and just be part of that on a daily basis, the students are already learning, and they just don't know how much that can contribute to their learning for the years to come. So, yeah.
Well, it was reminding me of a previous guest. Her name was Laura too. That was on the show, and she talked about when she came from Mexico, and she learned. She said one of the stories, she said she learned English by listening, to music,
Hmm.
and listening to the music over and over again, and that helped her. It was obviously, it was fun, but it also helped her learn the language.
Hmm.
And similar to like what you were talking about with math, and that was something that language, especially early elementary, the early math, that you didn't necessarily, language wasn't as much of a barrier, probably until you got to story problems and things like that, but it wasn't as much of a barrier, um, where how important it is for parents to be continually, they may not be able to teach their son math, but they can read with them,
Right.
and how important the ability to read and to understand language, that can carry you through a lot of different areas, right?
Yeah. And even cooking, it's like some people it says, okay, let's cook, let's do cookies. There's always measurements.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that kids can learn, experiencing with parents, while they're doing something. Then they, you can take that as a lesson. Let's do cooking today. We're gonna make cookies,
Yep.
and then and that helps. So yes, we must have had the same teacher, because one of my teachers, and I had an English teacher, she also recommended sing along with a pencil in your mouth and just listen. So then I remember getting the Paul Abdul tapes
Yeah. Oh, yep.
with all the letter, and then I would just read them. So that's how I how I learned.
Sure, sure.
I may not know what he meant, but I knew how to pronounce it. So it's just
Exactly. So I thank you very much for being on the show
thank you.
today, and sharing, because I think sometimes we hear about certain topics, but if it isn't in our living room, if it isn't in, our own immediate space, we may not really grasp, that. So I thank you very much for sharing some of your experiences, and then some of your perspectives, and what you learned along the way, but then also what you're doing now, because regardless if it's teaching dance for a quinceañera, or if it is uh, uh, doing what you do for your day job, or even the after school job, how important it is to help be not only an advocate, but then help be a resource for someone who um, potentially could fall between the cracks.
Right. Thank you for hearing me. Thanks.
So Laura, if there was anything that you would want anyone in the audience to leave with, what would be something you would want them to leave with?
I really, I will, I would like that if they come across someone that is in need of help, and that they can guide them, and if it's possible for them to guide them in every way or situation possible, not to think it twice, just to make sure to give someone advice, because they may not know if this person knows. A lot of times we just don't give advice because we think that they should have all the resources, but just by providing a little bit of guidance, it's helpful for someone, that is 19, that it's lost, for someone that is 19 that has to act as a parent in the house or as a translator for the parents. So if they can see someone that could be successful, just to guide them so that they can get to a better place.
Perfect. Thank you, Laura.
Mhm.
And thank you for once again for being with us today. And like we've said, we never know how just one story or one part of a story may give somebody some hope or some encouragement for their journey and where they're at on that journey. And I appreciate you sharing today. So.
Thanks for
We,
having me.
okay, you have a great holiday season, and keep up the good work in the Rockford School District.
Same to you.
Bye bye.
Bye.